Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today's video we're going to be going over the GT Epoch headsets and their variants. Take you through their history, some background on the design, and I bet you'll learn something new today for sure. First things first, if you're new to the channel, which I hope you're not, but if you are, make sure you subscribe. It only takes a fraction of a second, helps support me and the channel. And I promise it doesn't hurt. Not a little bit. Anyway, keep those notifications on so you don't miss any upcoming content. Now, let's get into it. So we need to travel back to the 1980s. GT was just starting to release their very first complete bikes rather than frame sets, and in doing so, they required peripheral accessories, including headsets. At the time, GT turned to Hada for their headsets and would use them through the early 1980s. So why is the Epoch headset important? Well, my first bike was a Ross 236 ZFX. Yeah, there's a lot of letters in there. I got it Christmas of '83, and here I am sitting on the bike at Christmas. Now, according to the specifications, it would have been equipped with a Hada or equivalent headset. And hey, it came with Z rims and Diacomp brakes. It's pretty well stacked for back then. When my family took vacation, we would spend time at a summer campground, but I was unable to bring my Ross bike from home. So I would end up borrowing some Schwinn with a banana seat. Now, what do these two bikes have in common? Well, the headsets would constantly loosen up, and I would be at the mercy of some random adult to help me tighten up the headset so I could continue my journey. I had fond memories of visiting my local bike shop to ask for help with that headset. And while I was there, check out the new arrivals. Now, I'm sure many of you recall similar dilemmas. In comes Mori. So who is Mori? Mori Manufacturing Co., Ltd., started in 1948 in Japan with a focus on textile equipment. A division of Mori ventured into tube forming, dies, and press equipment, located in Ibaraki, Japan, a district of Yuki. Now, I am confident I just butchered that name, but let's move on. Mori ventured into a niche market, creating a revolutionary self-adjusting bicycle headset. The U.S. patent number 4,531,756A was filed on April 28th of 1982 and granted in July of 1985. Mori offered their design to GT, who was looking for a replacement headset for their upcoming 1984 GT Performer. Knowing that the bar spins would eventually lead to loose headsets, GT wanted something that was virtually maintenance-free. Now, exactly how GT and Mori got together is a little bit of a mystery, so if you have any information on that, let me know in the comments section. In mid-1984, the GT Epoch was born. Now we're going to talk about the variants. The GT Epoch headsets have a variety of different styles, and they should not be called generations, nor freestyle, or race for that matter, and I'll explain why. The GT steel cap version of the Race Epoch arrived in mid-1984, while the GT Peak Epoch, which utilized the nylon plastic dust cap that was 1 inch tall, came out in late 1985. The metal cap version is what the community refers to as the Race Epoch. This version used a steel cap with a stamped GT logo, patent pending, and of course the word Epoch. The Peak Epoch was generally used on the lower end bikes, while the chrome-plated steel Epoch was used on the higher end bikes. In 1985, Mori switched the dust cap from steel to aluminum. This upgrade was first shown on the GT Pro Series for 1985. The decision to use plastic cap epochs simply boiled down to pricing. Now, the Peak headsets came in a variety of colors, including pink, white, black, GT blue, green, and lavender, while the alloy versions were mostly available in chrome plate, but also found in black with white accent lettering and white with black accent lettering. Now, keep in mind that the 1984 debut of the GT Performer and subsequent Pro Performer used the Peak and Race versions of the Epoch. This is why I disagree with the community when they refer to the epochs made for the Gyro for 1986 and later as the Freestyle Epoch. This is just wrong, and I too am guilty of calling it this. But remember, the Performer and Pro World Tour, they were using Freestyle Epochs even though they were Race Epochs. You see where this is going? In 1986, Brian Skura approached Gary Turner with a new idea he had for a detangler to compete with the ACS rotor. This design was a prototype, and it was not refined like the version we all know. Gary immediately shot it down.
This is the first ever concept gyro.
Okay.
Okay. And the interesting thing is I put this on my GT because I'm sponsored by GT.
Yeah.
I went to Richard Long.
Yeah.
And I showed it to Richard.
Yeah.
And Richard's response was, "You don't expect me to put that ugly thing on my bikes, do you?"
Really?
I tried explaining, no, it's going to be stamped steel. It's going to be this nice, sexy little deal.
This is a prototype. You're like,
Onward to Richard Long, who also said no to his idea. So Brian brought the concept to Odyssey, and they bought it immediately. The Odyssey Gyro was born. This detangler you should all be familiar with, but if you are interested, I made a video going over the generations of the Odyssey Gyro, and I'll leave a link to that so you can check it out. So in late 1986, GT decided to equip the Pro Freestyle Tour with the gyro. However, the upper gyro plate measures approximately 100 thousandths thickness. Adding this plate to the current Epoch would result in not being able to install the top nut to lock the headset onto the fork steer tube. GT needed a solution. Mori revised the Epoch headset for a gyro-friendly system. This is what the community refers to as the Freestyle Epoch. This is where the problems begin. Up until this point, the diameters of the dust caps, the correct name is actually the adjusting cone cover, for the Epoch are 1.870 inches for the peak style and 1.890 for the race style. However, the idea of the gyro detangler is 1.812. Therefore, the gyro detangler will not fit over the peak race versions of the Epoch adjusting cone covers. I know what some of you are thinking. Well, just switch the caps and the problem is solved. No, it's not that simple. Now, another issue was the mail order magazines simply listed the GT Epoch headset without distinguishing between the style, making matters worse if you were trying to buy a gyro-friendly version and receiving a race version. For the gyro-friendly version of the GT Epoch, the adjusting cone is different. The concave part is taller and narrower. This allows it to sit deeper into the cage ball bearings. On the race version of the Epoch, the adjusting cone concave part is wider and shorter. If you use the race style adjusting cone on your freestyle bike with a gyro-friendly cover, there will be a gap between the cap and the adjusting cone. That gap could be as much as a 16th and very unsightly. It also lets more dirt in and debris into that headset. So if you ever have this gap after assembly and you can't figure out why, this is the possible root cause. Another common issue is that people mix up the parts on these Epochs. So I highly recommend that you cable tie your loose sets together so you can't mix them up. Sometimes this is done purposefully, as people get different sets of these to try and find the very best of each part to make their own set for their own build. Another common issue is that the crown race is specific for the Epoch design and has a step on the race rather than a concave area like some of the others. Now, the bearings are also unique to the Epoch and require round retainers rather than the oval style. So if you do not have the correct parts, like specifically the crown race, it will cause you to have play in your headset when everything is tightened up. The overall stack-up height of the gyro-friendly Epoch is roughly 1 3/4 of an inch if you measure the crown race to the cover. Now, when you measure the race version, you get 1.860. The difference is 100 thousandths, roughly the thickness of that upper gyro plate that the cable's attached to. So essentially, the gyro-friendly version has a shorter stack-up and a smaller diameter cover or cap. Now, GT referred to these as LP, or low-profile headsets. Now, there are two versions of the gyro-friendly Epoch. The first version is basically for 1986 to about early 1987 for the freestyle bikes, and this cover had a stamped logo with the GT Epoch and all of that. Mori redesigned the cap later on to be a smoother version, opting for a silkscreen printed wording. Now, these versions were used from 1987 through about 1990. This decision was based on just cost cutting. Now, if you're building an error-correct late 1986 GT Pro Freestyle Tour, you absolutely want to seek the gyro-friendly Epoch with the stamped cap. Now, during the 1987 timeline, GT was well into mountain bikes and expanded their footprint. And Mori designed yet another headset for the mountain bikes and hybrids. The mountain bike Epoch is slightly larger than the race version of the Epoch. It's much larger than the Freestyle version, and you can identify the mountain bike version because the cap is taller and there's a boss area that mimics the lock ring thickness found on the other versions. The 1987 gyro-friendly version of the Epoch continued into the early 90s. In 1989, Mori moved most of their production to Taiwan, and by 1994, they exited the BMX and bike industry altogether, selling the rights to Tianxing for GT to continue using the design under the FSA name. The FSA headsets were nearly identical to the Mori Epoch versions, with the exception of a plastic dust shield on the racing models, dubbed the Pro Series headset. The change to the threadless steer tubes pretty much obsoleted the 1-inch and 1 1/8 threaded headsets, bringing an end to the need for this fantastic design. Now, I, for one, my 1988 GT Pro Freestyle Tour was equipped with the Epoch. I do not recall any instance where my headset came loose or needed adjustment. It worked perfectly fine the entire time I had my bike. So let me know in the comment section what your experiences were. So which models used the Epoch headset? Well, these would have been the mid-level to higher-end freestyle and racing bikes within the GT, Dyno, and Robinson lineups. If you had a Performer or a Vertigo, you would have gotten a generic headset. Now, if you're building an error-correct bike, you absolutely want to get the Epoch, and they can be pricey. If you're building a rider, don't get hung up on the need to find and spend big dollars for a GT Epoch. You can simply use a Tioga Bear Trap 2, which are readily available. So now I'm going to show you how to install the Epoch and the self-adjusting spring. It can be a little intimidating for first-timers. Believe me, this isn't complicated at all. Now we'll start after the cups are already pressed into place. So if you don't know how to do that, you should learn. Anyway, just make sure you tighten the adjusting cone down by hand, no more than 15 inch-pounds of torque. This does not require a pair of pliers or a wrench. The inside hook on the spring needs to engage the slot in the fork steer tube. The outer hook on the spring, once coiled, simply locks into the notches in the adjusting cone. Make sure everything is flush and even. Then you install your top cover and hand thread that down. Next goes on the gyro plate, if you're using a gyro, followed by the lock ring if equipped. Now, not all of them have the lock rings. Don't panic. Lastly, you want to tighten the top lock nut to 20 foot-pounds. Do not over-tighten this because you can strip out the threads on the nut or the steer tube depending on the material that the nut is made out of. There are some Mori headsets out there without any reference to the GT logo. These headsets were manufactured in the late 80s out of Adachi-ku, Tokyo, and sold to just mostly Europe. Many of them were anodized in a variety of colors, including gold. Sometime in the 2010s, boxes of these NOS Mori Epoch started showing up all over eBay and other marketplaces. These are genuine Mori headsets left over from production runs. Now, the important thing to note here is that these headsets are fantastic for sourcing replacement parts, crown races, bearings, and for all your original GT Epochs. Just food for thought. And that about wraps it up. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something new today. Check out my other videos when you have some time. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Now get back to those builds. Stay safe, stay healthy, and remember, tomorrow is not guaranteed.